Taylor Hawkins, Riding High by Robin Flans. Taylor Hawkins says he can't help but wonder when his life is going to fall apart. Things have just been going too well. He does have a point, though. The last time Hawkins was featured in Modern Drummer, he was working with the hottest female artist going, Alanis Morissette. He eventually left that gig to become a member of Dave Grohl's Foo Fighters. Not too shabby for a basically unschooled drummer who grew up in Laguna Beach, California listening to The Police and Queen. Before all of this success, though, Hawkins did have some trying times. His first band, Sylvia, had a development deal with Hollywood Records that never reached fruition. He spent his time working long hours at a music store, then going straight to seemingly endless rehearsals, all the time pulling his hair out, wondering why the band wasn't happening. Hawkins gave up on Sylvia and landed a gig with Sass Jordan. Musically, it wasn't exactly Hawkins' cup of tea, but he grew from the experience, and a bigger gig came out of it. When Alanis Morissette's manager brought her to a Sass Jordan show to check out the young drummer, the rising star was impressed and asked Taylor to work with her. Within months of Hawkins joining, Morissette went from playing clubs to performing in stadiums. Now with Foo Fighters, Taylor just shared recording duties with Foo leader and famed Nirvana drummer Dave Grohl on their latest, There Is Nothing Left to Lose. The album was recorded at Grohl's comfy home studio in Virginia. Taylor does seem pretty darn fortunate, especially since on the surface, his earlier musical experiences bear little resemblance to his current gig. Watching Taylor perform with Foo Fighters, you see why Grohl is happy to have him. His kick-ass, energetic style works perfectly in the band. Modern Drummer. How did you hook up with Dave? Taylor. I was on tour with Alanis doing European festivals, and we played some shows with the Foo Fighters. I met Dave and the rest of the guys, and we just hung out. Dave and I hit it off immediately. After that, we kept in touch. I saw him a few months later, and then they made their second album, The Color and the Shape. During the making of that record, drummer William Goldsmith left, and Dave ended up doing the drums on the album. William is a great drummer, and his band, Sunny Day Real Estate, is totally awesome. But not every drummer is right for every situation, so they needed a new drummer, and at that point, the Alanis tour had finished up, and I had been home for a couple of months. Alanis wanted to take off something like a year, and you have to remember that her situation wasn't really a band. Franz Stahl, the guitar player who used to be with Foo Fighters, said to me, "We need a drummer. You really should call Dave." I felt weird just calling and going, "I want to be your new drummer." Dave and I hooked up and he asked me, "Do you know anybody?" I said, "No, not really." We talked about it for a little bit and he said, "Well, what about you? What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just chilling. I'd like to come down and jam with you guys and see what happens." Dave said, "Okay, I'll bring a tape over." As soon as he came over, even before we played, we were having a good time together. We became such good friends that he just said, "Dude, you've got to be in the band." He knew I could play, even though my style was so totally different then. Modern Drummer. How did you feel about it? Taylor. I was psyched because that was right when music in general was getting kind of crappy. To me, one of the only good American bands was Foo Fighters. They're a real band, not like a Matchbox 20 and all those other bands. The Foos are a band with an identity, with good music, good albums all the way through, and good live shows. So at that point, I was psyched. We jammed a couple of times and it felt right, probably more personally than musically right off the bat. Modern Drummer. What did you do musically to get into that very different approach? Taylor. I had to relearn how to play in a way, especially to play some of their older stuff. I changed around a lot of the parts to fit how I play, as you would any time you take over a job. I can't play it exactly the way Dave would play it. It just took a while. Playing with the Foos definitely takes a lot more out of you than an Alanis set because the band plays all out. There are a lot more peaks and valleys and points where you can rest in an Alanis set. Modern Drummer. How did you go about learning the band's material? Taylor. I'm not that quick of a learner. It took me a long time to remember all the songs. Modern Drummer. What method do you use to learn things? Taylor. I have no method whatsoever, no charts or anything like that, so maybe that's the problem. Laughs. I just listened to the material a couple of times and practiced it a little. I figured, Oh, it'll come together when I get there. This whole band is lazy. We do what we have to do to get the material together. We save the work for our shows when an audience is there. But when we rehearse, it's a joke, especially if we're rehearsing a set of music we already know. Modern drummer. That must be part of the magic somehow. Taylor. I guess, if that's what you want to call it, laughs. Actually, it is very spontaneous. And sometimes we're really good and sometimes we're crap. Modern drummer. Do you talk about it after the show? Taylor. No. Once the show is over, we're done with it. We don't sit around and critique each other's performance. Can you imagine if I said, Dave, I felt you were singing that one part off key? He'd tell me where to go. Although if Dave goes, dude, you know you should play that one part straighter, I'll listen to that. But usually he won't say anything like that, especially after a gig. Modern drummer. What about critiquing yourself? Taylor. I used to be very hard on myself. With Alanis, if I didn't have a 100% show, which I rarely did, who does? I'd be upset. There are shows where you're on fire and others where you feel like you're treading water the whole time. It's very black and white for me. Music has always been more of an emotional thing to me. Did I feel good during the show? Modern drummer. Is there anything you do before a show that helps you get into the right frame of mind? Taylor. I have my little rituals. I don't eat for 3 hours before a show. I don't like to smoke or drink before a show. And that's just my own personal preference. The other guys might drink beers before we play. Modern drummer. What did Alanis say when you left her band? Taylor. It's funny, I remember when we were in Europe and on the same bill with Foo Fighters, and even then she knew I was a huge fan of theirs. When she saw the connection that Dave and I had, she actually commented about it. What would you do if they asked you to join? Besides, she was going to take a year off anyway. Modern drummer. You can't expect people to sit around for a year and wait. Taylor. She was going to pay me during that year, but that's not productive. Idle time is the devil's playground for me. I'll find some serious trouble. It's better for me to be busy. Modern drummer. You mentioned that you were a big fan of Dave. Taylor. He's such an influential drummer. Everybody was playing like him and stealing his licks, although I was kind of on the other side. As much as I loved Dave's drumming, I was more from the Stuart Copeland school. You should see my drum set now. It's out of control, so not alternative rock. It's so, as Dave puts it, pro. But it's very cool. Dave is awesome and amazing. I always loved his energy and his musicality when he was with Nirvana, without a doubt. He's very economical in the way he plays, whereas I'll throw in everything but the kitchen sink. I'm learning to be more economical from Dave. Modern drummer. Were you allowed to throw in everything with Alanis? Taylor. Oh yeah, bless her heart. She didn't really know what I was doing. She'd go, that's cool. And I'd go, yeah, I stole that lick from Rush's 2112. She was very sweet and awesome. I wish we were still friends. Modern drummer. Is she mad that you left? Taylor. I did another interview after leaving her band where I said stuff the wrong way, and the writer wrote it the wrong way. The headline was, Goodbye Alanis, Hello Foo Fighters. So right off the bat, it didn't look nice. And I said some stupid things. The drummer she has now, Gary Novak, is awesome. He can play circles around me, so everything is as it should be. But I felt bad. Modern drummer. The music was expressive and you got a chance to play what you wanted, so that must have been great. Taylor, it was totally expressive. I was able to do anything and she was totally cool with it. Plus, the drum set I was using with her was amazing. It looked like a music store. Modern drummer. How has it changed with the Foos? Taylor. This music is obviously more like Bonham meets Ringo, which is always how I saw Dave's style. I've had to learn to play more like that, which has been great for me. So I have less of the percussion things, although I am adding more and more all the time. Dave will come in and go, what the hell is that? I added some tone blocks, but the main reason was because live, it's really hard to get a side stick to be loud enough. Our sound man is always trying to gate the hell out of the drums so they don't distort live because I play so hard. Oh, I did just get these bitchin' rototoms, the big ones. 16 inches and 18 inches, and they sound like cannons. Modern drummer, what are you using them for? Taylor, for ruining the songs, laughs. I actually use them all over the music now. When Dave saw them, he said, no way. But now he loves them. Everybody loves them. My kid is starting to look ridiculous again. When was the last time you saw anybody using rototoms? In the garage in the 70s, probably. Actually, I stole the idea from Roger Taylor of Queen. He had two rototoms on his drum set, and they sounded very cool live. I put them above my floor tom and try to hit them in weird places in the music. I'll be doing a fill and throw in one little rototom hit at the end, next to the lowest floor tom. It adds this little pop. Modern drummer. Nothing is out of date as long as it's musical. Taylor. And as long as you're mixing it up. I love bands like Supergrass and Radiohead. Bands like that take the old equipment and make something new and fresh with it. Those are the resources I like to use. With what we do, there's a certain purity motto that says, as long as you can do it with real instruments, you're allowed to do it. If we made an album with a bunch of techno and drum loops in the background, people would go, oh, trying to fit in with the times? If we ever wanted to do anything like that, we'd start a side band. It wouldn't be under the banner of the Foos. This band started out with a garage vibe. Dave did the first album on his own, and it sounds like it was recorded in a garage. And that's what's great about it. You think about bands like Queen, and bands who did it and sounded fresh and exciting with real instruments. When Bad Brains came out, they presented a whole new way of playing punk rock that completely influenced that style. I don't really like a lot of punk rock stuff, but I like Bad Brains and some of the other 70s English punk rock. I'm not crazy about the American Orange County punk rock stuff you hear these days. Modern drummer. Let's talk about the making of the new album. Taylor. It was really tough for me. I've been doing stuff on my own in the studio for a long time. I have a little side project called Walkie Talkie, so I've worked in the studio a lot. But when I got in the studio to do this, it was different. It was tough to find how I wanted to play. Modern drummer. What was the process? Taylor, we went into a rehearsal studio 3 months before we recorded. The first thing we wrote was actually the most band-written song on the album, without a doubt. That was Aurora, and it's one of my favorite songs on the album. I saw Chris Squire, Yes's bass player, at a hotel in LA, and I chased him down to tell him how the end of Aurora reminded me of Yes. It was pretty funny. Modern drummer. What about the process you went through to record this album? You said it was tough going. Taylor. It was tough. It was just a matter of buckling down and trying to hear what Dave was hearing in his head and keep it interesting for me and him. He didn't really want to tell me what to do all the time, but a lot of times I wasn't exactly sure where the song was going because he writes the melodies and lyrics last. The studio is a different beast. I've been on tour for the last 6 years. That's a challenge, and there are some pressures involved. But there's a lot more pressure in the studio, mostly pressure you put on yourself. Dave didn't put the pressure on. I did it to myself. There are definitely a couple of things on this record, which I'd rather not mention, that will always make me cringe, and I'll always wish we could go back and redo them. Modern drummer. Is it a weird pressure that Dave is a drummer? Taylor. I made it weird for myself in the studio. It was like, everybody's looking at me, or Dave's the most influential drummer of the 90s. That made me a little insecure. There have been a couple of times where it's beaten me down a little. It's an identity kind of thing. But the most important thing is the songs, so I try to play for them and be creative. And there's a certain sound to the band that I didn't want to stray from. I didn't crank my snare up really tight or try to change the drum sound too much. Modern drummer. How did you approach the drums? Taylor. We had a great engineer/producer, Adam Casper, but we didn't have the drum doctor or anybody come in and get perfect drum sounds. There are messed up snare sounds all over the place, but they're cool. There was no real method. Whatever drum head happened to be on there that day, we'd hit it until Adam said it sounded good. I never even went into the control room to hear what they sounded like. Adam Casper is the most laid-back kind of guy, and he'd get a drum sound in like half an hour. Sometimes I'd just sit down and play and he'd turn on the mics and move one dial and go, "Sounds pretty good. Let's go for it." Not too intense. The most intense thing was what I put myself through. Everybody's got insecurities. Not only was I excited because it was my first big album, but I was also scared and nervous. I can't wait to do the next one. Modern drummer. What was the most difficult track for you on the album? Taylor. Probably Generator. The drum track is so weird and Dave and I sculpted it together. I came up with the verse idea and then there's the part on the chorus, which was Dave's idea because he had already demoed it. The arrangement changed a lot, so I remember that as being a difficult drum track. It's not one of my favorites on the album. Modern drummer. What did you do to try to get a grip on it? Taylor. I just did it over and over again. That was the extreme in that direction. The opposite was Aurora, which came so easily. I feel that the playing and the feel on Aurora is the way I play naturally. The swing that it has is really who I am. I think the hardest thing for me with this music is the straightness of it and making that feel good. I was so used to syncopating and swinging with Alanis that it's hard for me to play very straight music now. Modern drummer. What about recording some of the mellower stuff, like Ain't It the Life? Taylor. That one is very eagly and beatly. Dave took all my drums away except for snare, kick, hi-hat, and ride cymbal, and we went for the most Don Henley drum sound possible. We put duct tape everywhere, all over the snare and kick. And then we put this echo effect on the drums so that it has that sort of beatly toilet bowl drum sound. As we kept doing the song, Dave was telling me there are too many fills, no fills. So there are no fills in the song. It was exactly what the tune needed. Modern drummer. What in your formative years do you think prepared you for this situation? Taylor. Everything. I don't want to sound too general, but I really feel like every little thing I've done, from high school band and cover bands to the Alanis gig, has prepared me. With each step, you learn something new about playing and music. Modern drummer. You didn't have any lessons. Were you playing to songs as a kid? Taylor. Yes, and I was trying to get bands together as soon as I could pick up a pair of drumsticks. That was the whole reason I started playing. I was completely enthralled with music from the time I was a little kid. I also thought it would be so cool to play drums. Instead of getting everyone together for a baseball game, it seemed more fun to me to get 4 of my buddies together in my garage and play Rush songs. Modern drummer. What do you think your strengths and weaknesses are as a player? Taylor. I think my strength is my enthusiasm to play and to make everybody around me have a good time. I think also the fact that I try to write songs on my own gives me a good approach to the drums. I'm thinking about songs as opposed to workouts. I think my weakness is that I don't hunker down and keep the time solid enough. I tend to speed up a bit. I had to use a click for the album because I'm a spaz. We recently did a TV show where we felt we sucked really bad. Dave hadn't had any sleep the night before, and it was this 8-song thing. After watching the video of it, though, we realized it was really good. We realized that we do whatever we do, and even if it isn't technically all together, it works. Sometimes you play even more earnestly when things aren't perfect. We watched it and realized there was a lot of emotion, sweat, and guts. We were watching Rushmore the other night, and the Who tracks came on, and it was, yeah, Keith Moon. Nobody in the world can play like that. He could go from being the greatest drummer in the world, the most poetic, expressive drummer, to stopping the song in the middle. It's really emotional. But good rock music has always had that element. That's what scares me a little about technology. We didn't use any Pro Tools on this album. We didn't go through a computer to fix things. We left all the warts. There are so many flubs, but the more we listen to it, the more the flubs become part of the song. All we wanted to do was capture how we sound as a band. Modern drummer. The album notes say the songs were written by Foo Fighters, which indicates a collaboration. Taylor. We're a band and we get along unbelievably well. It's gross how well we get along together. We're like 12-year-olds. We hug and stuff. We roast each other too. The roast sessions are really intense, but it's a real loving vibe. But you know what? It's not fun to be on the road when there's animosity. I think a big part of what makes us feel so good together is that Dave is such a good person. He's already done so much more than anyone can hope to do in their musical existence. He's in his second great band, so the attitude is, we're here to enjoy it. Modern drummer. When you look at your career, it has to create some anxiety when you're with this hot superstar girl and then go right from that to one of America's coolest bands. Taylor. It's the impending doom syndrome. I feel like I've been too lucky. When's the shit going to hit the fan? Plus, I feel guilty sometimes because I make so much money doing this. It's hard when you call your friend back home while you're on tour in Australia with your girlfriend, having a great time, and your friend can't even pay his rent. Sometimes I feel terrible, but I've been able to help out my family and friends, which feels good. I do feel lucky.